Welcome to your awakening. Please take all of your reality adjusted. To that volume. One day I might actually do this using the proper live broadcasting stuff, so that then I don't have to keep messing around with me volume up and down, volume up and down. Yeah, one day. Welcome back, folks, once again. Hello, good evening, welcome. We're just a minute or two, well, 2 minutes past in the end. Slightly late, like we usually are. It's become a regular habit. It's not always guaranteed to be exactly on time when we start, but we start in the end, eventually. Doing my usual multitasking, getting different screens ready, well, open and up so I can see the chat room again. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Oh, I hope you're all well, and if not, I hope you're getting better. Onwards and upwards and all that kind of stuff, and let's dance quickly away from the common cliches and get back into the usual flow. Yes, good evening, welcome back once again to another edition of Sol Excalibre on this moon day evening. Monday is the day of the moon day follows Sunday. A time for reflection, because the moon is all about reflection. And in that reflection, hopefully you can see and reveal the inversion and the reflection, the smoke and mirrors illusions that you're being presented with, because the light you're looking at is just a reflection. It's not the original source light that you're looking at the moment. It's illuminated pixels, technology, a fake light, not a real natural light. All of these words are somewhat subjective. Real? It's a real light. Anyway, yes, hello to people in the chat room. I could see Paula B in there. Hello, and really graceful. Hello, thanks for joining us. And Dot, who's recently gone from formerly known as a non-violent extremist now to formerly known as Dot, formerly known as non-violent extremist, now known as cannabis-based life form. Yeah, welcome to the age of transition. And Stewie, hello mate, glad you joined us as well. I'm gonna try sending out another invite if I can while I'm talking, and I will come back to do my usual of talking about what's been going on this week. There's quite a few things to mention, but there's one point in particular I want to pick up on that may have gone somewhat unnoticed by a lot of people, maybe not, because it has been in the mainstream press, but sometimes these kind of things can often get sort of pushed to the back of the public's general attention, because they're quietly mentioned just in the background, so they're gone while they're distracted with all the other flashing lights and spectaculars that are going on across the other parts of the media, such as the Trump visit to the UK and all the pomp and circumstance. I think we sort of talked about it a little bit on the reality chat last Wednesday. I don't really have much more to say about it, apart from it was what it was, and most of it was what I was expecting. Trump just enjoying his time of being recognised by the royal family, such that now he can perpetuate this idea that he has in effect been given the royal approval, the royal seal of approval to attached to his name whenever he's trying to sell some shit that he wants to sell. No, I can't do that from there. We'll come back to that in a sec. Okay, I'll shut up and do me rambling, because otherwise I'm distracting myself too much trying to think about sending out links. And I've lost my chat room again. Get back to it though, it is. Right, thank you. Yeah, Trump visit. Trump in, May out. It may be the end of June. June is the end of May, all that kind of stuff. Fantastic play on words available in the English language because of her name. You know, June is the end of May. If you hadn't noticed just by looking at the calendar, what comes after May? And now we're in June. What's happened? May's gone. Way! Is there some strange coincidental timing with that involved? I think there might be. But then again, I'm a YouTube radical, supposedly. And I'm going to come back and mention that as well, because it does interlink into the other main point I want to bring up. But yeah, May out, and they were presented with a selection of junky politicians. Oh man, I could just the comedy value of this is only depleted by the reality of one of those fuckers is going to get into that position, and that's how shit things have got, where people are arguing over who is the best junkie, criminal, defrauder, potentially paedophile that we want to be in charge of our country. Bojo is just the joke that he is. Bojo, the political chimp, I usually call him. You know, that is what he does. That's what he's good at, playing the buffoon, even though he's not really that dumb. That is a facade that he presents to the public. He's quite a, I think, nefarious individual that disguises his machinations, whichever way you want to say it, by that front of buffoonery. You know, don't be deceived by the silly yellow hair, you know, stuff like that. He may look like a clown, but that's not what he's doing behind closed doors in the corridors of power. You know, you want a clown in charge of you? Yeah, just all of that is just, yeah, I think we can talk about it better on a Wednesday night when we look at like news events and stuff like, there's various questions that could come out of that reality of a selection of drug abusers, you know, and I'm using a lot of mainstream media wordage, vernacular to describe these people, because that's part of that left-right political gameplay bullshit that they want you to demonize these politicians and support the politicians on the other side of the argument. Yeah. So it's a bit of kind of gutter press political wrangling of they're dragging out all the shit about these people. And really, it's a reality that the vast majority of politicians have got similar rap sheets, basically. Similar histories of the same kind of behavior, but they're presented to the public with this pretense of being, you know, the great and the good, and they're so fantastic, they should rule over us, they should be the ones in positions of power. Yeah. Is it part of the normalizing of the corporatist system, the externalizing of the hierarchy of everybody knows we're ruled by criminals, so why don't we just admit it up front? And then we get rid of the angst that's created by the pretense of being good. And as situations get worse in the world, as corruption increases, because that's a correlating curve. As the general situation gets worse, the corruption will go up, because people desperately do bad things to try and protect themselves from the ever worsening general situation. So more people take bribes, more people do backroom deals, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. Is it more about them revealing that corporatist reality and normalizing it so that the public just go, oh, well, yeah, let's just select whichever one is the least worst criminal, the worst, the least worst. Lesser evil is still evil. All the kind of cliches can come out at that point. So we've got that going on here in the UK, all timed off the back of Theresa May leaving, Trump's visit, And it's not long, a weekend or two after the Bilderberg gathering. This also then brings me into the other sub point that I wanted to mention, the recent YouTube censorship and the proposed YouTube exodus. I'm glad Grace was in the chat tonight. I watched a video the other day where she's basically saying, I'm not leaving. They want us to leave. This is part of the campaign that they've been building on. And I totally agree. And I've often talked about people who do content creation, who do this kind of media thing, whatever you want to call it. It is certainly worth your while to diversify how you do what you do. So have accounts on other platforms, make use of other services and platforms to secure your content. So if it gets deleted on one, you've got backups on the other one. Make backups at home, keep copies of all the stuff that you create, and if you can, keep copies of the sources that you're referencing. That's not as easy because that requires quite a lot of data storage space, which many people don't necessarily have. And it's time consuming as well. If you've got to constantly make backups of what you're doing and file them away and stuff like that, it takes time. And that's all part and parcel of why they've done this rolling censorship that they've been doing for the past few years, because it's not just what's been going on recently. This is the current incarnation of it this year. Something similar happened several months ago. You got the adpocalypse and all that kind of stuff, which we've talked about before in the past. This is this year's version, and it comes not long after the Bilderberg gathering again. So the Bilderberg group gets together. They have a little section in the publicly available itinerary that says we're going to talk about social media being used as a weapon, weaponized social media. A couple of weeks later, mass censorship on YouTube. Curious and curious, said Alice. Yeah. Is there a coincidence there? If you want to be a coincidence theorist, carry on. Keep counting up your coincidences and see how many it takes before you realize it's a conspiracy. How many coincidences are required to equate to a conspiracy or to reveal the conspiracy? So yeah, they're bringing in this new censorship. On the back of that, there is this political propaganda drive talking about the YouTube radicals, or the radicalization that takes place supposedly on YouTube. I haven't had the chance to listen to a lot of stuff on that particular article. There's an article that's in the New York Times that I'll reference a bit of it in a little bit. I haven't had the time to look at a lot of content that people are commenting on it. I've seen a couple of videos that mention it. But one in particular, Jeff C's video that he put up last night, I haven't had the time yet to listen to that and see how he breaks it down. I'm sure he'll do the usual kind of job that he's good at doing, and breaking it down and showing a lot of the bullshit propaganda in it. And the deliberate directing and painting of a politicized agenda into this environment. Synchronistically enough, and I think it is just this time of year. In this year, there is ongoing things. I've ranted about Year of the Phoenix, all that for a while now. Over the past couple of weeks, I've talked about how chapters seem to be being closed and new chapters opening, or they're moving forward to a next stage in the agendas, such as Agenda 21 and things like that. The 5G rollout, etc. But recently, synchronistically, I just happened to click on a couple of videos from channels that I'm still subscribed to, and I like to keep an eye on the kind of content they're putting out as a reference, because I want to know what's going on in this environment, and if people are going to be pushing particular narratives, I like to see, well, how many voices have they got talking about that one? What are the demographics of the talking points that are being moved around in this environment. So I tuned in for about 20 minutes to a show by somebody that, over the years I've ranted about a few times, Kev Faker, I'll refer to him as, because I've watched his career right from the start. I had a little bit of involvement with some of it, and he ran a mile away from me. When I met him at the Bilderberg, he stayed well away from me. The Schilderberg, I should call it, really. Yeah, and over the years, I've watched how he's positioned himself and been groomed into a replacement mouthpiece for a lot of the bullshit churning. The general sort of just detritus that gets thrown out there to keep people confused, or to keep them spinning in circles, or to misdirect them, etc., etc. And I'm fairly confident that he's only ever done what he's doing because he's looking at it as a job. For him, it's work. He earns money at it, so he'll just keep piling out the crap because it brings the money in. Part of the problem of them monetizing this environment was it was done deliberately to encourage exactly that. People will peddle bullshit just because it earns $1, and that therefore pollutes the knowledge base that is available for people when they come to this environment. Snake oil salesman selling bottles of shit, basically. But I happened to just, out of curiosity, I thought, let's see what the fuck he's talking about at the moment. Tuned in, and about 20 minutes, all I could put up with it was about 20 minutes worth, and I heard just a continuous stream of him saying the kind of things that we've been talking about here on my show and on Reality Chat and in other hangouts when we've had meetups with other people, had long conversations. Things such as the flat earth is a psyop. It's like, oh yeah, it turns out flat earth's a psyop, and QAnon is total bullshit, deliberate, controlled opposition, limited hangout. Oh yeah, it's talked about that for and using a lot of the phrases and key knowledge of things such as the Hegelian dialectic and the process of the bringing together of left and right extremes such that they can manipulate people in the middle. That sounds so familiar, doesn't it? So if you're listening in again at the moment, mate, or you've got somebody tapping in for you who passes up key information to you so that you can then splurge it out as if you've thought of it, because that's what you are, a faker. You keep moving that information forward, mate. Yeah, that's the main thing to me. That kind of knowledge base and perception is now reaching further, and it's actually connected with a lot more people. At the same time, I tuned into another one that, like I say, I'm still subscribed to keep an eye on and see what the general topics of conversation are, the We Are Change crew. And they happen to be an event where, what's his face, Luke, is talking to G. Edward Griffin. And I'm thinking, yeah, I can listen to him. I've listened to much of his work before. I've read some of his stuff. Okay, yeah, listen to that. And he starts talking about the Hegelian dialectic. And to me, it comes across as if he's stumbling a little bit, as if it's recent knowledge that he's not yet fully conversant with. So he struggles a little bit to explain what he means when he's talking about that use of the Hegelian process to control a political narrative and agenda. And that had me thinking, oh, yeah, there you go. It's another crazy. This is now becoming more widely known. I can remember several years ago when concepts such as false flag wasn't generally known amongst the mass of the populace. It was somewhat of a niche bit of knowledge about, terminology and definitions, really, when it comes down to it, but it's about methodologies of power and control. That now is pretty much common knowledge. The mainstream has even spent time over the last few years deliberately putting out articles to try and steam valve or control that new knowledge that the general populace has gained, that such a thing as false flags exist, and they're often used by governments to manipulate their own populations. The media has been used to try and redirect people to go, oh, no, it's only the naughty rulers that do that. People like Gaddafi, who was a naughty guy, they do false flags. But we here in the amazing Western civilization and China and Russia, well, we don't do things like that. No, there was no false flags in Chechnya to enable the Russians to attack the the people there. And there were no false flags in Tibet so that the Chinese could, carry on oppressing the Tibetan people and claim that area as their own. Oh, no, we don't do false flags. Only the naughty people do false flags. It's become somewhat common knowledge, that terminology. Some of the others, such as things like controlled opposition, limited hangout, they've tried to deliberately push certain keywords and phrases and snippets, chunks of knowledge that is meant to misdirect deliberately. So things such as the deep state. There's never been anything such as the deep state other than it's the backroom dealings of every ruling structure that has ever fucking existed. It's just now they want to try and convince you it's called this particular thing so that they create a box, so that then that box acts as a containment field for anybody that they dislike or want to deal with. So some particular talking head in the public view is saying things that the current government don't like. They go, oh, he's naughty because he's part of the deep state. That creates a bias in the public's mind then, or the listener, the receiver of that information has a propensity to bias against that person because they've been informed, they've been basically indoctrinated to accept that the very label deep state, you should automatically have thoughts of bad connotations, bad connections when you're given that phrase. Conspiracy theorist is a classic one. Now it's quite easy to hear somebody, certainly in this online environment of talking about this kind of stuff, that giving a good explanation of where the term conspiracy theories came from and why it's bunkum and why you shouldn't really pay much mind if somebody says you're a conspiracy theorist. If anything, you should say, yes, I am. I actually use my brain. Thank you. Yeah? I don't just accept what's doled out to me by somebody who wears a uniform or a badge or claims to be in some position of power. No, I think about it. Anyway, yeah. Going a long way round. I had to mention that kind of somewhat synchronistic to some of the stuff that I've been talking about for years. Just happened to be going on around this time, but to me, it all adds into this changeover that's taking place. And now we've got to a point where I'm glad to say a lot of the information that used to be very sort of secluded in a niche environment, in somewhat of a excluded, ostracized demographic of people online, it's reached more into the mainstream. Even though, as we often talk about here, and as many other people often try to point out and reveal for the public, that new body of information, the system is desperately trying to either control that flow, that spread, that growth of awareness, or they're trying to misdirect it. They're trying to come in, appropriate it, turn it into something that benefits them and redirect that energy off somewhere that is no threat to them, to diffuse it. But to me, I'm looking at this from the point of view of the global awakening process, which I do think is taking place. Some people like to make it somewhat mystical. I don't think there's necessarily anything mystical about it. It may involve a certain amount of mystery, but the mystery with the definition of my story. It's only a mystery until you start looking at it, and then it reveals itself for what it is. It's a mystery as long as you don't comprehend it, that you don't bother spending any time to consider it. The consideration you give it will reveal what it is. The world is going through a major paradigm shift, a major change, and that involves many levels of changes. It's not just like now we've got this new technology. It's not just flying cars all of a sudden or anything like that. No, this is a shift on every level of our existence and experience of existence. Did you get your own New York Times article written about you after the Build-A-Bear meeting? Yes, he probably did. It does seem to coincide quite often. So anyway, me mentioning those other things, sort of seeing how this information and certain little chunks of information that help people, they're like part of a toolbox that help you dissect the propaganda and the bullshit, are reaching more and more. They're spreading out to a larger and larger crowd of people. They're gaining more numbers, and it's being passed on again and again and again, to the point that now the system has to try and react by creating something such as that New York Times article. I can't remember exactly what was the full title of it. Something like how YouTube radicalizes people, the making of a YouTube radical, I think may have been the full title. But I'm sure you'll be able to find it easy enough if you do a search for something like that. Just put YouTube radical NYT, you'll find it. If you really, really want to read it, but I warn you, it is a long diatribe of very particular political propaganda to give you an impression, because that's how the nudging works. It gives you an impression that feeds into a bias that the YouTube environment needs to be controlled because it radicalizes people. In the same way that newspapers radicalize people, because that's a form of media. What about books? They radicalize people. What about politicians giving public speeches? They radicalize people. So should we control that now as well? What is it about YouTube that makes it the enemy, the bad guy, the reason why people get radicalized? They just want you to accept that, we need to sort this shit out. Problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic. Look, here's the problem, folks. Look how terrible YouTube is, because we allow it to be its own thing and it radicalizes people. Hey. I'm not going to pick into the article completely because there's too much in there. We could spend multiple shows talking just about that article and pulling it apart. But I'll read out the last, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs and a sentence that's at the end of the article, because to me, I'm saying that a lot tonight, to me, it's my opinion, to me, to you, but for me, that just the end of that article rounds it all up. Basically, the article was just a total vacuum. It's just a vacuum. It's a fart in an open field, because that last section just turns the whole thing on its head and basically said this whole discussion was pointless. I'll read it out to you. It might make more sense to you if you haven't seen the article. Quote, near the end of our interview, I told Mr. Kane that I found it odd that he had successfully climbed out of a right-wing YouTube rabbit hole only to jump into a left-wing YouTube rabbit hole. I asked if he had considered cutting back on his video intake altogether and rebuild some of his offline relationships. He hesitated and looked slightly confused. For all of its problems, he said, YouTube is still where political battles are fought and won. Leaving the platform would essentially mean abandoning the debate. He conceded, though, that he needed to think critically about the videos he watched. YouTube is the place to put out a message, he said, but I've learned now that you can't go to YouTube and think that you're getting some kind of education, because you're not. End quote. So they spend this entire long article talking about how this guy was sucked in by the algorithm on YouTube, and he was shown crazier and crazier and crazier videos, and he couldn't help himself but keep clicking because he's just a dumb rabbit that has no free will choice. He just has to click, 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 and now all of a sudden now he's radical and he's buying a gun and he's I'm angry. But in the end, he started looking at stuff from the other side of the political argument and realized that he needs to think critically about the stuff he's absorbing on YouTube. And he's like, well, you need to do that in the whole of your fucking life, mate, not just on YouTube. What about the shit that the government's pumping out? Do you think critically about that? No? You get the subtle misdirection there in the wording of the article. It's like, no, you don't need to think critically about what they say to you. You only need to think critically about content created on YouTube that's not from an official source. totally ridiculous, complete and utter waste of space in terms of an article and its supposed claims that YouTube is radicalizing people, because they refute their own argument right at the end, because the guy is better off for having gone through this process of going, oh, hang on a minute, what's this side of the argument? Oh, hang on a minute, what's that side of the argument? Oh, I'm going to step back and think critically about what I've looked at. Ooh. So in other words, he's grown and he's developed an ability for himself that means he's much more capable of independently looking at information and making his own decisions and conclusions. But YouTube is still where political battles are fought and won, in the way it's written there. They don't directly quote him at that, on that bit. You know, it's not in speech marks, and they're not directly quoting him. They've reworded something that they've supposedly heard him say. So again, they're subtly directing the public to believe or to have a bias that YouTube needs controlling because it's affecting the political argument, and that people are utilizing it like a public square, which was the service it was originally offered for. That's why it's called YouTube, even though, you know, we've all been acknowledging that it's been ThemeTube for a very long time. It's a public square for people to have discourses, to have debates. And if that's a political debate, then it's a political debate. If it's an argument about whether they should grow onions or radishes in their garden plot, it's a gardening debate. So the whole article is just a deliberate attempt to give people this sense, this connotation, this bias that they need to react in a certain way and demand for a solution, that YouTube needs to be controlled. And this is riding on the tsunami of this new wave of censorship, which is just after the Bilderberg meeting, where they wanted to address the weaponization of social media. When they say weaponization, really they're talking about the use of it to create political bias or to drive the political demographics in one direction or the other. But they're using the terminologies of violence and death and destruction. In other words, radicals, you know, they're supposedly the people that burn your city down and whatever. And this sense of extremist, violent kind of output. They, in the article, they're mainly talking about the right-wing this, the right-wing that, because they're keeping people trapped in the left-right bullshit of the political game. They just want to use this construct that they've been building for the last few years of the extremist and violent right-wing people that are a threat to modern democracy and progressive changes in the world and blah, blah, blah. It's a construct that they're using to claim homegrown terrorist effects. You know, this is something we've been talking about. I say we, I've been talking about for years. We have been talking about in a general group of people that congregate around here, and other content creators that do this kind of commentary and dissecting of the propaganda that gets pushed out in the media. You know, we've been talking about this stuff for a few years now. They've quite well established the concept in the public's mind of terrorists in other countries that they can then use as the justification to go and invade those countries and take them over, basically neo-colonialism. But this stuff now is built on the back of the concept of the lone wolf extremist at home. So in other words, what is going on in the war front now has to be brought back home to the homeland. And now the homeland is a new war front. And you need to accept this, and you need to actually demand the solution that this environment is controlled by the system via a proxy corporatist private entity called Google, Alphabet, whatever fucking label they stick on it. But that is just a proxy. It's an illusion, a facade. This is a corporate structure that is intrinsically part of the structure of governance that claims rulership over you. Now, in a very long-winded fashion, like I often do, I listened to Max Egan again. He made mention of over-intellectualizing stuff. I like to keep things simple. Yeah, keep people simple. Keep people simple by not getting them to exercise their mind. Yeah, mince your words down to the smallest, easiest to understand comprehension. Yeah. In some ways, that's useful because you can reach a wider audience. The larger the demographic you're trying to talk to, the more your language has to be reduced to common understanding, to a common denominator. But at the same time, I would argue, and the reason why stuff like that pisses me off when people say over-intellectualizing is because, well, you want people to stay dumb. You don't want them to flex their muscles and actually develop their ability to use their own intellect, their own intelligence, their own cognitive mental abilities. You want them to just, keep it simple, stay dumb. Part of this process has been going on for the past several years, really since the advent of the internet, but we've been through various phases of them making it accepted and giving people such an amount of freedom that they joyfully and willingly immerse themselves into the internet, and they help grow it and spread it to become what it is now, and to become a matter-of-fact, ubiquitous part of everybody's daily life, such that now your interactions with the governance that rules over you requires you to have internet connectivity and a online persona of some kind, a social media persona or whatever. That structure has been set up and encouraged now to this point to serve these kind of purposes of this control structure of information and the limitation of people's abilities through their access to information and their perception of what they're presented with. So if you keep them dumb, they'll never be able to understand the larger concepts that are going on. But thanks to this little bit of freedom we've had to interact on a global scale via this internet technology, this has helped fertilize that awakening process in the same way as when the Gutenberg press, the printing press, first sort of made the difference for the general populace and made knowledge more available to people en masse. We're going through another similar process now, a new renaissance, a new change of paradigm, because now the general populace has the ability to self-educate and to learn and to find out about things that they never realized was the way their world worked and the way the governing systems operated, such that now they're going, hang on a minute, we ain't happy with that shit. I didn't realize it worked like that. I want to change it. I want something better than that. We've gone through this process, this arc of them allowing people to see how they can use this technology and then drawing in the reins and closing it off into what they hope will be a manageable environment, such that it creates things like the social crediting concept. So if anything, it traps you further into that construct of the governing systems. And in that respect, the so-called deep state effect of you just accept the fact that there is this backroom operating part of the system that you're never supposed to see or acknowledge. Such as the politicians you see on the TV are the ones that you're supposed to think are the people signing all the papers and writing all the laws, whereas the reality is there is a 10 times their number of faceless bureaucrats that you never see in public, have no public interaction, and you have no recourse to address them or appeal to them or anything involving them. They're the ones that are actually writing the laws and signing the documents and all that kind of logistical requirement to make the governance work. It's not deep state like, so-and-so politician is a member of the deep state. He has private meetings with other people and they make secret conspiracies to control the government. You mean conspiracies are real? I thought you said conspiracies were bullshit. But you want me to accept this concept of deep state, which means there's certain people that are conspiring, because if they weren't conspiring, then it wouldn't equate to what you describe as deep state. Yeah, anyway. That brings me back to what I was saying about the YouTube censorship, and the YouTube exodus. And as I mentioned, Grace put a video about, I ain't leaving. And I've got the same attitude. I've mentioned this a few times before. I've talked to other people about it. Yes, it's worthwhile as a content creator for you to diversify such that you secure your work, your effort. If you put it all here and nowhere else, and then YouTube does its thing and just starts deleting shit, you've shot yourself in the foot. You let yourself down, let alone the people that end up subscribing to you, your audience, basically. You're letting them down as well. So, do things in that kind of sensible fashion of making sure your content is at least backed up, so that if you need to, if you get pushed out of this environment, you can set up somewhere else and start putting it up again. But the main point is that they're after at the moment is they want us to fuck off. They want us to go away because they could not eradicate, and I mean that in a sense of censorship or shutting down people's channels. They could not get rid of us or shut us down en masse the way they really want to, the way that they know would be effective in terms of serving their agenda to create a controlled environment. They couldn't get away with that without being spotted by the general populace, and it would reveal their method to try and control information, because literally millions of channels would just get shut down overnight. So instead, they've been doing this process over the last few years where there'll be some kind of controversy, some YouTube talking head who's got millions of subscribers or say something a little bit naughty, and they'll go, oh, look, we need to control it. It's shut down, shut down, shut down, shut down. And they'll go through a tsunami of censorship, and then it will quieten down a bit, and everybody in the YouTubes will adjust their stance, and they'll be careful of how they say certain things, and then the thing will roll on a little bit further until the next time they do. So this whole argument that a lot of people have put out there of like, oh, you need to get off YouTube because it's so unfriendly and they're censoring us and you can't do this, you can't get off YouTube, go somewhere else, go to such and such platform. That's what they want you to do, because as they described in that New York Times article, as they deliberately implanted into the reader's head this concept that YouTube is where the political debate is taking place. So if you reduce this macrocosm environment to a microcosm synonymous metaphorical example, there's a little town hall meeting and the political debate is going on and the people are sort of shuffling around in the town hall talking to different groups and individuals and trying to gauge what's going on. And there's a bunch of security standing for the local council, the enforcers, the authority, are coming along and going, oh, mate, you ain't welcome in this conversation. You get out, you go outside, go outside, go. We don't want you in this debate anymore because we don't like your point of view. Get out, get out, get out. That is in effect what they're doing. So if you exit this environment because, oh, it's getting difficult, they're cracking down with all this censorship, it's getting hard to do what we do in this environment, that's exactly what they want. They monetize the setup, the technology, the YouTube platform to encourage people to link their effort to earning money via this platform. So in other words, people build their living by doing their content creation. That means that the system then can apply economic pressure to force you to follow their rules. So they hold that threat over you with the little switch of like, oh, well, if you say naughty things, we'll turn off your monetization. So that was a deliberate entrapment. And I said this years ago when it first started. Monetization will be used as an entrapment to force you to say what they want, to force you to become the new mainstream media platform if you are a content creator doing stuff on YouTube. And now they pushed it to the point where they've got this ambiguous code of conduct and rules that means basically if they decide they don't like you, you can be shut down. And it's like the sword of Damocles. Look that up if you haven't heard of it. But basically, it's like they're holding a threat over you, and they're saying, "Oh, if we decide we don't like you, we might kill you." What was that line on Princess Bride when he's talking to the younger sailor, the younger cabin boy, and he's saying, "You did a good job today. I might kill you tomorrow. I won't kill you today, but I might kill you tomorrow." That is what they're doing in this environment at the moment. And that is to manipulate people's thinking by affecting their lives and the environment they're doing their thing in. If they're, providing content for people as a service, or they're, asking for subscription fees or whatever, however they choose to do it, they're holding that pressure over people to force them to follow a politicized narrative to serve that political agenda. Now, this brings me into the one other thing I wanted to mention, and hopefully, like I do, will make sense once I wind it back together, thread it back together. But just to have a little rant about this, so I'm going to put a link, if I can get the blooming browser to work. Give me that. Right, okay. Hopefully I'm not lagging out too much. A chat room. And I paste that. Oh, hello, Jeff C. Just seen you in the chat room, and when I've gone back to the chat room, hope you're all right. Yeah, that link. Big shout out to that guy Scott Webb. Well, shout out to Scott Webb. His channel's called That Guy Scott Webb. I'll put a link while I'm thinking about it. I'll do this now. I'll put a link to his video that he did talking about this article, and it was where I saw it from. So thanks to him for bringing my attention to it, but also for talking about it as he does. He reads through some of the article and he talks about it, and some of the potential implications of this kind of stuff that's being raised with this article. The article, if you're not looking at the chat room or not, looking at the visual content, I haven't clicked screen share, have I? Donkey, get your act together, man. This is so unprofessional. Right, screen share. I'm not going to read everything, just mainly to show you the article so that you can see what I'm ranting about. It's confirmation. Seeing is not necessarily believing, but it helps in the process of cogitation, which just means thinking about, basically. So this article in the Telegraph went up, when was it? A few days, the 5th of June, so 5 days ago, last week. Schools to analyse children's drawings to help catch paedophiles. Well, straight away, hopefully it should stand out to many people. If you're interested in the kind of stuff I'm often talking about, it should stand out to you that the help catch paedophiles part is the bait to convince people that they want this, that they will demand it from their government, that this happens because, paedophiles. We need to deal with the paedophile, even though most of the paedophiles are interwoven into the governmental infrastructure. If you analyse children's drawings, you'll help catch paedophiles. Of course, there's a certain amount of truth in this, which would benefit our society, as in it would help catch people doing this kind of shit. Yeah? They use the term criminals at some point, I think, but there's other articles going around at the moment talking about using mental health care methods to deal with more of the again, supposed paedophile problem, the pedogeddon problem. And again, there's some truth in that if you believe the statistics that however many hundreds of thousands of people have been caught with child pornography of one kind or another, or have got some kind of connection into that child pornography problem. There's literally hundreds of thousands, to the point that they were talking about how they could not prosecute all of these people because there's just too many for the justice system to deal with. But this article is using that problem and that deliberate bait to get people to believe that this is something that you really, really want, that you should demand in your school. New software to help catch paedophiles by analysing pictures and stories produced by British school children aged as young as 9 will be trialled in primary schools. So please take note that this is not just going into a senior school where older children who are probably already somewhat sexualised, if not quite a lot sexualised, more likely post-pubescent, you're talking 13, 14, 15, 16, the last few years of general education, they're more likely to have, emanations or demonstrate to reveal, what would you call it, keywords or tells or just hints that they're being abused or harmed by somebody in their peer group or in their social network or something, or online. Whereas younger children in primary school, they really, really want to get them as young as possible, because in the earliest years of life is the primary foundations of your personality and your cognitive abilities. So much of your cognitive abilities can be affected by what you learn in the first 7 years of life. So they want to get in that time period and start doing this monitoring. But basically, just to read out a couple of bits so you get the idea of what it is that you're doing. The system uses keyword algorithms and image detection software and will automatically alert teachers if the software detects they could be at risk. Who's writing the software? Who includes the definitions to say what equals at risk? Did the kid draw a picture of a tree? Does a tree equal something bad that they should be denoted as at risk? Do you see what I mean? Who is making the decision of what is included in that system? And it's at no point mentioned that by the very existence of this system, somebody else can come along later on, either as part of the software company or as part of the government, such that the government says we want this added to the software. And they decide that not only do they want it to detect for paedophile possibilities, for images or keywords that might indicate something like paedophilia, but they want you to also look for images and keywords that would signify whether the child is likely to be right wing or left wing, whether they're likely to be a radical or a conformer. All this kind of information could be quite easily detected once you've got the infrastructure of this monitoring system in place. Children will create their own online journals and interact with cartoon characters. Your children are going to be educated by cartoon characters on a screen who will prompt them to answer questions about their emotions and safety online. Yeah, I could really, really extend and extrapolate to a massive degree, to the nth degree, just on this short article of some of the stuff that's mentioned. But the one other main thing that I wanted to point out was, that this will, 2,000 children at primary schools in Essex, London, Stoke, Birmingham and South Wales will participate in the trial of the technology ahead of a planned rollout in England and Wales. So in other words, they've already got it planned. They're ready to roll it out. They're supposedly just doing a little trial at the start, which is a little bit like what in the gaming industry would be called a beta test. Just before they release the full price game for sale, they'll invite people to take part in a beta test where the players get the game for free. You get to go in and you play around with the game and you report to the software company if you find any faults or bugs in the game software, and they can tidy it up before it goes on the shelf for sale. That's what they're doing with these trials. These trials are just to finalize the software because it's already planned to be rolled out. Was you told your school that has your young children as young as 9 enrolled in that they're going to have these monitoring software deciding, watching for keywords and algorithms for paedophiles. Watch out for them paedophiles. Were you told as a parent, if you've got young children, were you told anything about this? Were you informed? Were you asked for informed consent that you're okay with this monitoring of your children taking place? I doubt very much that you weren't, that you were. I think it more likely that you were not informed about this, because that's part of what they do. They just do it. They let you know after the fact. Like that article is letting you know after the fact that this is going to happen. I'm sure there might be some of the usual kind of naysayers that will come out and go, oh yeah, but Cookie, it's a bit semantic. They haven't actually said it definitely is happening, which means it might change in the near future. Yeah, fuck off. I ain't got time for that shit anymore. I had enough of the fucking bullshit naysayers who are just taking the piss and exploiting people to either generate money out of them or to validate their own bullshittery that's stuck in their heads. By the time you grew up, fucking get on with shit. Sorry, I'll end up ranting because that's kind of shit like I've just been reading out just makes me annoyed, so I end up ranting at everything and anything. Anyway, to finish up and to make the point of why I wanted to mention that particular article and what's contained in there and why I think it's relevant to the censorship. They want to install this stuff in primary schools where children as young as 9, so it will begin. They'll extend it to full time once they go, oh, look at how well it worked. Look at how good it worked. Look at how the AI is able to monitor your children and adjust the curriculum so they learn better. In other words, so they learn to repeat the indoctrination better, so they become more programmed like robots. Look at how good it's working. We should roll this out across the whole of education. So now your children from year 0 to 16 will have this kind of infrastructure over them, monitoring everything they do, all their social interactions, all their internet time on whatever device they're using, because don't think it'll only be limited to the school. And this is the reason why I wanted to mention this in relation to this recent wave of censorship and this propaganda, such as the New York Times article about, YouTube radicalizing people. These are the same kind of arguments and the same kind of bullshit illogic that they've been using for quite a while now, for a number of years, to claim justification for the stuff they're doing. So it's not like it's a new idea that they're utilizing or a new argument that they're presenting to the public. They're not. Part of the problem is a large amount of the general populace still doesn't have the ability to pick through the arguments that are presented to them such that they can refute them or show them to be illogical in the first place. Most people never look at a subject such as philosophy to learn some basic abilities of how to use your brain to think through an argument. So, they rely on that fact and they just keep repeating the same methodologies. They just keep redecorating the same lies and just representing them to everybody again and again. So they're not saying anything new with this latest propaganda. They're just building on that backbone of, oh, well, radicals at home, how are they being radicalized? Oh, well, look, it's from this media format. Oh, well, we need to control that media format. And the public demanding that control be brought in, now being extended to the point of monitoring your children. In the beginning, it will start as monitoring. Eventually, they'll suggest that you need to allow the system, the AI, the algorithms, to include stuff for your children, such as recommended viewing, like the bit where it says, cartoon characters will be interacting with your children to ask them about their emotions. No human, no person, no other being saying to the kid, like, how are you? How do you feel? Is there anything upsetting you? Is there anything you want to tell her? No human connection, no. Just a screen with a cartoon character. Disney emotion, E-Christ. The E-Christ was a part of the THX1138 movie storyline. If you haven't seen it, please check it out. But please try and find the director's cut version, not the usual cinema TV release version. The director's cut has got some important scenes put back in that needed to be in that storyline in the first place. But this all links into the same internet, social media, social crediting system, virtual panopticon, digitized persona environment that they are, I was going to say trying to build. It's not trying to build anymore. As I've been repeating a lot this year, this stuff is happening now. That was another synchronistic thing for me when I listened to a few other people, such as Max recently, and he's saying the same thing. I've been saying it for a while now, Max. I know you tune in. I know you fucking listen one way or another, and I know you repeat some of what I talk about. Yes, it's happening now. This is not, oh, soon they might do this, soon they might do that. No, this stuff is happening now. As it says in that article, a planned rollout in England and Wales. If you think they're planning it here in the UK, they're going to be planning it in the other Western nations and NATO allies, and in Russia and China as well. You know, China's ahead of us in that respect. And I've argued for many years that China is the model that they are following, that they are copying. China is the test bed where they've been building this globalized single system structure for a while now, and it's used as the example that the rest of the world copies in one way or another. Might be some slight tweaks to suit local culture and geography and whatever, but it's basically the same shit they've got in China. So, as I put in the subtitle, and there you go, look at that, an entire hour of me ranting before I even mentioned the subtitle under the video, but that's the point. And why, you know, I felt the need to talk through all this stuff before I mentioned the subtitle. I'm not sure where this quote originally comes from. I've tried to track it down, but the internet, when I do a search for it, it just keeps referring me to Sun Tzu. And I'm not sure it was originally from Sun Tzu. It might be. But anyway, just quoting as the subtitle. If you want to defeat your enemy, raise their children. You know, I've heard it quoted before slightly differently. You know, if you want to truly defeat your enemy, bring up their children. You know, there's some slight difference in wording, but it amounts to the same meaning. The same chunk of knowledge, the same truism that's been passed down through generation after generation. To truly defeat your enemy, you have to make sure you eradicate all knowledge of them. Because if you don't, there is a possibility, there is the potentiality that those who still have the knowledge of that previous empire, kingdom, whatever it was that you've destroyed, the enemies that you destroyed as the winner, that little bit of knowledge might bubble away in the minds of those people who still have it, and eventually it could grow into a threat to you, the winner's empire. So to truly defeat your enemy, you have to eradicate all knowledge of them from history and from the minds of the generations that remain after the war, after the destruction of said empire. Please bear this in mind when thinking about that article about the monitoring of your children. And please try and use that to help yourself step out of the naivety that the vast majority of people who claim to be in power, who operate in what we generally refer to as the political world, the political circles, governance, all that kind of shit, view you as an enemy. Because they want to raise your children. And who is it that wants to raise your children? The only people that would want to raise your children for you are your enemy. I'm not talking about your friends or your relatives helping you out, or maybe, you know, your relatives joining in that kind of co-care, you know, the extended family, extended care of looking after the youngest generation so that we flower, you know, because you need more people to keep going. It's about the race people, not the individuals. I'm not talking about that element of people working together to care for the youngest generation and introduce them to the world. This is about controlling that generation, that newest generation. The only people who would want that level of control over the youngest generation are the people that are your enemy, and they view you as an enemy. The very concept that there can be anything other than the current status quo ruling over you is a threat to the current status quo ruling over you. And they want to eradicate that threat. They preferably want to eradicate it from the entirety of history, so nobody ever remembers it or even conceives of it. So therefore, to do that, to achieve that, they have to raise your children so that your children will never be introduced to a concept that thereby could threaten the current status quo of rulership. This is literally 1984 all over, and we're going through that transition into Brave New World, where people will not be given access to information that would allow them to even conceive of being against the current system in any way whatsoever, of disagreeing with the current system even, or speaking out about it. I might be speaking a little bit of what could be considered, pushing it, stretching it a little bit of what's going on at the moment, talking about extreme possibilities that could happen in the future. But no, I don't think I am. And I'm not here saying this stuff to try and frighten people. It's not about frightening you. A little bit of fear helps keep you alive, helps you survive this world, this existence that we experience. But fear doesn't dominate you unless you let it. Being aware of something that might be scary, that might be fearful, doesn't mean that it has dominance over you. It just means that you acknowledge that it can be a threat to you. It can be harmful. This kind of stuff, a lot of this stuff that's going on at the moment is harmful to you as an individual, you and your family, you and your community, society as a whole. So if you can take that perception without letting it bias you into an extreme opposition, because you're not going to be able to deal with this shit by just violently opposing it. That's exactly what the system does. This is about hearts and minds. I know it sounds cheesy and cliche, and a lot of people get fed up when it gets to this kind of point in the conversation. Oh no, we got to destroy them. We got to burn them down, chase them out, all that kind of shit. All that's going to do is repeat the cycle, repeat the circle. We'll go back to the beginning again, and it will be a different king sat on the throne with a different face, with a different rule book that says you must obey. It's not going to work like that. It's going to work by helping everyone, and in particular the youngest generations, to see how this new technology can be and is in many ways being used against them. You can be afraid of that if you want, like that kind of dystopian fear of the near future. But it's not about being afraid. Afraid won't, solve the problem. I'm scared of that mouse. Oh, the mouse is still there. I'm still scared. I'm being scared of the mouse, but being scared of the mouse is not making the mouse go away. Oh. No, you have to get over your fear and deal with helping the mouse to find the outside again, because you don't really want him living in your living room with you. You don't necessarily have to destroy something to change what it is. Sometimes things can transform without the loss of or destruction of the old. The old just becomes part of what is the new, interwoven into it. It's like an old tree finding new growth. If you've ever seen when they do what's called pollarding, when they chop a tree trunk quite severely to cut down its growth, doesn't necessarily kill the tree. Sometimes it can, especially if it's not done well and stuff like that. There can be other conditions that affect it. But my point is, it doesn't necessarily kill the tree. The tree will just regrow. It will change its shape based on the fact that you removed a big trunk, part of its trunk. It's not always a good thing to do, but that's managing gardens and forestry and whatever. And they love to think of us as cattle on a farm. it's about time the cattle started, kicking back. When they come to milk here, just shit on their hands. Shit on their hands and stomp on their feet. Get your hooves stomping on their feet. I'm being silly now. So probably a good time for me to shut up. I think I mentioned everything I wanted to mention. The junky politicians and the censorship and the YouTube exodus in my notes. I'd also put YouTube exodus will lead to a corralled echo chamber where you have these other little platforms, these little services that the general populace will never go to. Most of them probably wouldn't even know about, but you'll have a sense that you're still able to do your thing because you'll put your content out, and some automated system will give you a little like and a share and whatever, and then that'll make you think that you're doing your thing, but you're not really. Just like the shadow banning here on YouTube, you feel like you're doing your thing, but you're actually not reaching the wider audience.
I was going to say, Cookie, you mentioned cartoon characters being used to, and this new software to catch paedophiles and everything else. I thought cartoon characters, well, we get presented them as adults, don't we? Every politician. It's like,
the junky politicians.
It's everywhere. But yeah, the dumb for me. I thought it was just the dumbing down thing. I put it was my notes when you was chatting away. They're just successfully doing that day by day. It seems stupefying us all, or trying to.
To me, this is similar to the the illogic. Sorry, I'm trying to get it out without destroying everybody's eardrums. The illogic of claiming that you need to shut down the public debate because some people have ridiculous viewpoints. So if they've got ridiculous viewpoints, let them reveal their ridiculous viewpoints, and we can all see them for the ridiculous person that they are for having those viewpoints. It doesn't mean you have to go, oh, somebody said we need to have this, that, and the other. You don't need to go, oh, well, because he said it, we've now got to install that as our governing system.
Yeah.
No, it's just part of the debate. And in the same way, when it comes to this claim of like, oh, you're over-intellectualizing the subject. So, well, if you don't like the way I present it, go and listen to somebody else who presents it in a way that you prefer. If that's what's bothering you from not involving yourself in the information, it's just the way I present it, then don't listen to me. But don't ignore the subject matter and the information. It's a non-argument to me to say, oh, you're over-intellectualizing. So, what? You mean you don't want to think about it? Just because I have a way of thinking about it that creates all these points and all these data points that you find difficult to deal with, therefore you think I'm over-intellectualizing. Fuck off somewhere else, man.
You have to keep learning. That's the whole point. Stretch your brain a bit. It's about evolving, learning new things, and keep going. And this thing saying about trying to put people off using, say, YouTube or uploading and all that stuff, that's been going on for ages. That's nothing new. They've always been at that. It just seems to sort of, it just gets, it seems to be a wave of stuff. If there's something happening, like a big story, like we had Pizzagate or whatever, or something big breaks, and you'll see where the censorship comes in, when there's certain narratives they don't want you to talk about. So we see it all the time. It's not new, but you should still keep doing what we're doing. When we present it in these types of fashions and this sort of way, you just, it's okay. You're allowed to have the debate and speak about it properly. You can. I think when the algorithms kick in and everything else, if there's certain subjects, especially certain certain types of religions you can't talk about, certain types of events you can't talk about. We know this, but that's why we talk around them or talk about them, or in a certain way that doesn't let them come along and chop you down.
One that it was in my notes, but I forgot to mention it at the start. One of the anniversaries that occurred recently that's of an event that's of note is the USS Liberty. That was the 8th of June, I think, so a couple of days ago, over the weekend. But that reminder for people, because I know some some content creators have made a video talking about it and the fact that it's the anniversary again, and so even though there is a certain amount of acknowledgement out there, most of the general public are just distracted from those kind of stories because there's other shit going on, like Gove snorting coke. So you want an example of a false flag that's got evidence behind it, provable, and reveals the methodology of major governments, not some tin pot dictator in a third world country. No, major global players will utilize false flags against each other for political ends. Look into that event over the USS Liberty. You know, so reminding people about these things is a way of helping people see the methodology. Then you don't have to go over every single event and say, here's the details of this one. Here, let's analyze this picture, and I can show you that that bit there is false and that's photoshopped. And you know, debunking every detail of every event is partly how they've trapped a lot of people in this YouTube environment. Yeah, they've given people enough leeway so that then they can come in after the fact and go, oh, you shouldn't have mentioned that, it's naughty, you're censored.
Yeah,
So
that's how they do it. But they still don't stop it though, Cookie. The growing awareness of this stuff now, like you said before, you know, there are people out there, even if it is the Kev fakers and the like, it doesn't matter, you know, the information is getting out.
He's reaching more people.
Exactly, and if people do repeat each other as well, that's a good thing as well. So if it's good stuff or good information, people makes them think, makes them become more aware of stuff. That's the whole point. And then they're becoming more hardened to things like misdirection and lies, and they see through the propaganda a bit more. And so it's once like a domino falls, like I've always said, they all start to go in your mind. You think, right, okay, I'm onto something here.
It's the 100 monkeys effect, isn't it?
Yeah. It is.
Can I get away with playing just 2 seconds of this video? Did anyone watch this? I put a link on it on Skype, yeah?
Depends what it is. What is it?
It's a chimp playing with an iPhone, yeah? And
what channel is it on?
I'll put it on. There's no advertisement on it, yeah. Oh, I'll tell you what. I'll just skip frame by frame, yeah.
Yeah, do it frame by frame, because sometimes it depends on the channel. Like if it's Rupley, they will crack down on anything of their content, even if it's only a second or two.
Well, I'll tell you some screenshots. There it is. There's a monkey playing with the scrolling thing. Look, there's his fingers. It's scrolling on the phone, yeah? Watching pictures of itself. But the moment when it becomes really human is when the human guy, he talks to the monkey, and he's almost distracting the thing. Yeah, so it gives him that look, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's talking to the monkey like right now, yeah? And the monkey goes like...
It's a dismissive glance.
Yeah, it's like, fuck off, don't disturb me, I'm on my phone. And it's an absolutely human look it gives him, yeah? Just dismissive look.
It is a...
It's a really quick eye cut to the left, yeah? I can't find it. It's so quick, just fuck off. I'm on the phone.
I know what you mean, though. Yeah, he's engrossed in it. And I was going to say as well, it is... I say it's just an extrapolation. I'm not, trying to dilute what you're showing there, what's seen in the video or whatever, but chimps and other primates such as orangutans and gorillas, some have been taught not only sign language, but also use of screens and symbols on screens. So it's not that they're I'm not, how to put it, it's not that this is something new that a chimp would be able to figure out how to use a screen and interact with it, because they've been doing that for quite a while now. They'll show an image on a screen and the chimp is required to select a certain one to pass a test and get a banana, stuff like that.
I thought that was in the House of Commons.
Yeah, it goes there going, which button's for the cocaine?
The thing is, it's that contemptuous look, like the chimp can't multitask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people on phones. Yeah, it's the same looks that you get from them. Yeah, I'm on the phone.
I know I've said it before. I do think there's something about the visual sense for those that are sighted. Obviously, if you're blind, this don't count. But there's something about the visual sense that, for the mind, seems to over-dominate the other senses for most people. So people pay the most attention to their sense of sight, and illuminated screens capture your sense of sight quite readily. Yeah, we seem to get hypnotized into them, and you get that kind of like with television, the old argument about the alpha state effect. You're almost hypnotized by the way it draws your attention in, and you can feel the peripheral vision for most people becomes like this, yeah, and they are blinkered into whatever it is they're looking at.
Don't go to the light.
Yeah, it is like a moth to the moon, a moth to the flame.
Yeah. Lighten up your brain, or like you say, it's this impact it seems to have, especially with the pads. And you mentioned, you know, iPhones and all that stuff, and yeah.
I mean, in my little quotes that I put in the info box under the videos, you know, that bit I've got about read more than you watch. I think I can't exactly change that because it would break it a little bit, it'd spoil the flow of it. But really, I should be more specific about saying, like, I don't mean reading text on a screen. Yeah, I'm talking about reading a book. Not having an illuminated screen, and certainly not if you're doing it with something like one of these. I'm not going to say a brand name because people know what they are, and I don't want to promote them. But the reader books, you know, the electric books where you can download the book, and you read it on a screen. Fucking throw those things in the bin, for fuck's sake. People, please stop buying them because they are deliberately made to destroy your knowledge base.
Yeah. And
that's, you know, I'm saying it in that way because extending on what I was talking about last week and in relation to what I've talked about tonight, and like that article talking about monitoring your children, etc. Yeah. The youngest generation is going to feel the worst effect of this as they grow up, as they get older. We're already starting to see the effect in the current adult demographic of the millennials, because now the millennials are hitting adulthood, and they're certainly in that demographic if you include back to 1980. Some of the arguments claim that being a millennial begins in 1980. So if you count that in, that means they're in their 30s, at least 30 to 40 years old. We're already starting to see the emanations in society of the damage that was done to that generation by the total immersion in this internet technology. People have no concept of what it was like without the internet. The rise in the narcissistic and nihilistic personality types stems out of that hypnotic immersion into that sense of your own solipsistic individual reality. Nothing else exists except what's here on the screen for just you. Yeah, you break that by doing things like putting down the screen and picking up a book. You help kids to get that connection to books and reading that is not on a screen, not on an illuminated device. It will help break that control that they're trying to instill on everybody.
And listen to your music, don't watch it.
Yeah.
And if you've got kids, try to get them to make things like models. Because you notice as well with iPhones, I think a lot of the satisfaction people get out of them is it does force you to interact with those finger movements.
Yeah.
All that dexterity. Yeah, it's not like, you sit and watch the television, and after a while you actually start to feel guilty because you're just not moving. You know, I'm turning into a vegetable. But they're interactive, the phones.
As a little, just amusing anecdote, but amusing in an unfortunate way, ironically amusing to me, basically. One of my little relatives and little nephew, she'd be my great niece, I think, possibly now. I'm not sure the distance in relation wise, but when she was about 2 years old, and my nephew, her dad, had just got a new TV and had set up the new TV and whatever, and the little ones that walks up to it and just starts striking like that across the screen. She thinks she can swipe the stuff on the screen on the TV, yeah. And to me, that was an indicator, even though it's funny at the time, it's like, oh, look at the little one trying to swipe the screen. But it was an indicator that a child at that age, the age of beginning to learn language, in other words, how to interact with the outside world, including other people, was influenced by her small amount of knowledge about screens, where the thing you see on the screen, you swipe it and move, causes it to move and stuff like that.
Yeah, and in a lot of the feminist movements, I would say, and a lot of the snowflake movements, we've seen that attitude actually being put into action. They think they can go on a march and just swipe, and the things they don't like will be disappeared. You know, I call it the Harry Potter generation. Everybody thinks they're a magician because their phones have taught them that they can do magic.
This is not the screen you were looking for.
Just swipe it out of the way, yeah? I mean,
these are not the radicals you were looking for.
Yeah.
And so far, I think I've done all right with what's going on YouTube at the moment, but I've been waiting for him to drop the hammer on me or drop the sword of Damocles at some point. But we'll see how things go. I think as long as I keep dancing the way I do. And like I mentioned earlier, talk about methodologies rather than particular events. So that way you're not giving them the excuse of like, oh, you're debasing, you're causing slander, you're speaking hatred against a certain individual or words. No, talk about methodologies.
Well, like you say,
yeah, I was going to say this. You said paradigm shift or these major changes. It's here. It's happening. We're living through it. I've said this for a long time anyway. You know, the stuff they've been pushing on us for a while, and we've been speaking about it for 7 years or whatever now, or whatever on here. You know, and it just seems that we're in the middle of it, like with 5G. You know, it's here. It's been launched. It's switched on. They're using it in certain areas now. Will be across most of the major cities in the UK by the end of next year. Say it'll all be fully 5G'd up. And there's nothing that seems to be happening other than, you know, we see people with the, you know, we know the the effects of this thing. We talk about EMF a lot, but you know, there's people like us speaking out. There's articles out there, but the mainstream and the stuff we're trying to sort of do. I've seen other channels. I won't mention them, but you know, almost like knocking people down who are, you know, and talking about, you know, not the real subject itself. You know, talking about personalities and all the rest of it. I've seen that recently.
Resorted to ad hominem.
Yeah, ad hominem attacks on certain individuals who do some very good work. You know, that kind of thing I've seen happen, which is, again, doing disservice to the stuff just our little groups do. We know we're not massive. We know we're just trying to do, but like you say, push that information out. It gets to other people. But there's other elements within it that are not doing a really good service at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And those are the ones you've got to kind of use your radar on. And if you're a good critical thinker, like you've been mentioning, Cookie, you should be easily seen through a lot of the shit anyway, without a problem.
Well, I noticed the Polish Prime Minister, I think, or the highest minister in the EU from Poland, was talking against 5G the other day. But remember, this is only a week after Bilderberg. And, you know, you saw Belgium, you've seen The Hague, I think, and you've seen a few other places in Europe sort of saying, putting a moratorium on 5G. We want to get it tested first. Yeah. And they've made me recognise that there is such a public outcry that they're going to put a couple of bus drivers in there, like the guy from Poland. So he'll say, oh, we're going to stop 5G in 6 months. Oh, well, we had somebody test it and it's okay. So they're going to put even their biggest gatekeepers at some of the highest positions for this one.
Look at the... I mean, there's a string of examples you could give to try and help people comprehend how the industry is manipulating the information such that they want to convince people that it's safe so that they buy it. You know, I mean, even things like the glyphosate with Monsanto at the moment. You know, I think it's become pretty much accepted now, and it's common knowledge that glyphosate is dangerous. You know, basically, it's carcinogenic, even though some people will still argue about that. But they will admit that, well, yeah, it seems to be dangerous in large quantities, blah, blah, blah. But the the court case is going through where it's been, you know, ruled in a court case that, yes, that was the cause of the guy's cancer and whatever, and there's other court cases based on it. That's just one example of how an industry can have such a dominance over the public knowledge about their science, their service, their product, and at the same time influence the corridors of power, the governments and the supposedly independent bodies that are meant to watch out for this kind of dangerous shit. They've dominated them so much that they got away with selling that shit into our societies for decades such that it's now being found all over the place. You can't get away from finding it. It's become part of the fucking environment. But they managed to do that for that long. And that's just one example. You could dig through others like tobacco and whatever. You can see how big industries can quite easily dominate the discussion and dominate the available knowledge, such that the public is convinced that there's either no danger at all or very, very minimal risk that they then accept because they've been convinced that it's so small, it's inconsequential, that kind of shit.
Even if it's earthquakes with fracking.
Yeah. And now you apply that to this new technology, which has become intrinsic to nearly every country's infrastructure. Certainly if you live in one of the developed nations of the world, supposedly, as they call them, developed nations, it is absolutely now intrinsic into the infrastructure of how your society operates, the internet technology. That, combined with the sheer scale of the industry profitability based on things such as the amount of e-commerce that takes place, the amount of businesses that do what they do online, sell their products online, the gaming industry, the entertainment industry, the sheer amount of money involved pretty much guarantees that industry will be actively trying to dominate the information to make you think that it's safe and okay and you really love it and this shiny thing will make your world fantastic if you buy it.
Corporate control dumbing you down.
Yeah, but people don't want to take a breath and hold back a step and go, hang on a minute, before we make this fucking ubiquitous everywhere so that there's no escape, and maybe we should just check again. Let's check your sums and make sure your science is good before we accept your claims that it's okay and it's safe. Have we not learned anything in the past several decades of this dominance of this corporatism structure?
Yeah, it seems they'll hide behind a lot of the mental health issues. It's interesting how they push that agenda quite heavily, and now we've got 5G being introduced.
Yeah,
isn't it?
And 5G will create the required bandwidth for AI systems, such as the one described in that monitoring of your children, to be ubiquitous all over the place. You think they're only doing it to kids in the schools? No, that kind of system will be monitoring all of the internet. Everything you do, all your interactions, it will be watching and creating a personnel profile about you, saying he likes this, he dislikes that, he can be influenced by this, he can be pressured by that.
Yeah.
Did you mention both the Guy Scott articles? Because there was a modicum of truth in that thing about getting children to draw pictures, because that, quite often a child abuse victim won't talk about it, but the people interviewing them, the police officer or whatever, can get them to draw pictures.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where they've taken it from. That's where they said, oh, everybody knows about that, and they think it's a good idea. Let's use that. But then he mentioned in another video a Law Gazette article that was saying that there are so many people now who've been caught, that they're not going to prosecute them straight away. They're going to try and re-educate them first. So, why are they trying to catch them if they're just going to be letting them go? In the other article.
And it brings up the question, I did sort of mention it, but I didn't reference that other article that he was talking about. I was mainly talking about how the judicial system was claiming they can't deal with the sheer number of cases. But it does also bring up the question, to me it does anyway, it brings up the question of, well, if they say they've got this technology to be able to monitor children and figure out that there's paedophiles abusing the children by what the children do, why have they not been able to catch all these paedophiles? Why has this been going on for so long if they've got this ability to monitor people such that they can get an indication that there's some kind of abuse going on, but they can't catch all these
people? We know with the story they mentioned a while ago about the abuse of online abuse images of children, that they know is something like 750,000 men or something in the UK or something, or IP addresses they have, and they know who they are, but there's just too many to prosecute.
Yeah,
we mentioned that about ages ago. We mentioned that.
Yeah, that was the one I think that they was kind of referencing, because they said that there are so many people who have been caught with just the images. They haven't ever touched a child, that these people need re-educating. I'm thinking, well, yeah, okay, but
Jeff's done a few videos on the concept of the what do they call it, the virtuous paedophile, and they have been slowly introducing that concept over the past at least couple of years, probably.
Well, I would imagine a lot of them actually did end up looking at child abuse going through different porn sites, almost by accident. I mean, they didn't turn back, but they didn't actually go looking for it.
That's bound to have happened.
The AI put it in front of them.
But that's bound to have happened, considering the age of the internet and the fact that 1/3 of the internet is porn. Then pretty much guaranteed anybody who surfs porn websites, especially if you've been on the internet since it started, at some point child pornography may have passed in front of you. You might not have known. Yeah, you might have just been surfing through a website and it was there on a website. But yeah, that's the main question it brings up to me is like, why is it all of a sudden, if they've got this AI stuff set up, then they'll be able to catch the paedophiles, when they've already got this backlog of court cases because they've found all this information about people. But supposedly they can never pin it down, they can never really catch them all and all that kind of shit. Fuck off.
And if you do get close, they'll lock the information up for 100 years so you can't see it.
Yeah. If you get too close to the governmental connections, then no more investigation.
I was thinking of the Dunblane massacre with Thomas Hamilton, the guy who shot all the kids. He was a scout leader who was a paedophile, and you can't read about him, can you? That information's still under lock and key or whatever until another 50 years or whatever.
Wasn't it a Freemason as well, or was it a Freemason who gave him the gun that he used?
Yeah, it was all linked to the head of NATO at the time, who was a Scottish politician. I can't remember his name, but if you look into that case, there's a lot of information in that will make you think again about the official stories that they always dish out to you. The links that all these, and we've got the 9/11 coming up in a few months' time, 18 years since then, and the shit that's happened since then. So we're pushing these narratives, and
I think the solstice this year is going to be interesting.
Yeah,
to see, because I think that is going to be quite pivotal. I can say it. Pivotal. Yeah. I know it's.
Well, I hope the weather gets better, Cookie, because it's shit at the moment.
I know it's been quite chilly and drizzly here. We've had thunderstorms and stuff.
Yeah, same here.
I like the rain and the thunderstorms, but it's June. You're not supposed to be doing this.
Where's the warm weather? Where's the warmth? It's not here yet.
Christ, an old lady was fainting coming out of church yesterday. And there was no sun. It was one of those muggy days, with the whole feet in. Nice and hot today, though. Really sunny.
Oh, Gary, it's making us feel really jealous over here because it's pretty crap in the north. Anyway, in the north, in the grim north.
As long as you're not shivering, mate, don't worry about it.
We should improve, hopefully, but we'll see. They did say we're getting it all going to change, but it hasn't got this far yet. I don't think.
Yeah, but Al Gore also said we wouldn't never see snow again. So
well, I hope we don't see that on the solstice.
Oh yeah, that's
totally fucked up.
So I think it was Adapt 2030, and mentioned in one of his videos, Al Gore had gone to visit Australia, and there was pictures of kangaroos jumping around in the snow. Honestly, it's almost like the AI in the sky is really just taking a mickey out of Al Gore wherever he goes. Yeah, nowadays.
Yeah, did he win an Oscar? He won an Oscar for that bullshit, didn't he? I'm sure he did.
Yeah, an inconvenient poop.
Yeah.
I think we should do a new version of it called an inconvenient poop. Hello, I've just come to poop on your cognitive doorstep.
Now we have a bit more. Well, it's not even refined, is it? The Extinction Rebellion shit. That's not very refined at all.
That I thought about mentioning that as well, connected into the controlling the youth, raising the children. They have pushed that shit into the schools. That is the equivalent of saying it has official sanction to do what it's doing, because they've allowed it to be presented and promoted in schools, such that they've recruited a whole load of school children to carry this banner for this supposed argument of the Extinction Rebellion. Yeah,
Yeah.
So that is another example of them, the enemy, raising your children. They want the deniers, which they suggest are primarily us old people from before the advent of the internet, are all too old and dumb and doddery and stupid and crazy that we think that Al Gore's claim of anthropogenic global warming was bullshit. So we need getting rid of. So they're training our children to be completely the opposite to us.
To hate us as well on the way through.
This is, it is very 1984, where the children will, accuse their parents of thought crimes and shit like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that AI thing, analysing the children, it's almost like the Scottish named person. But when they saw how unpopular that was, they're going to do it with AI instead.
Yeah, they don't need to have a person. It will be the AI. It will be the device that monitors your child. And that again, I think, I know I've banged on about this so many times before in the past, but I think it may be difficult for many people to comprehend the sheer scale of the invasive abilities of the technology when you've got the Internet of Things on the 5G and the social crediting system, whether they admit it existing in reality or not. It is already there. The foundation of it is already there. They'll just keep extending it and building on that. But this stuff is going to be so invasive into your lives, that kind of monitoring of the child everywhere it goes, all its interactions, even when it's at home, even if it puts the phone down, like the device that you think, I know a lot of parents have this impression that the child is only in danger when they've got the phone in their hands. And that's not strictly true. It's like, are you using a phone around the child? That is dangerous for multiple reasons. One, the listening that is going on your device will pick up what the child is doing as well in the background. Your interactions on that device may give indications of what's going on in the child. So you might be messaging the other child's parent saying, like, oh, they did this today, oh, they said that word today, oh, isn't it great? Here's a photo of them. And at the same time, the psychological effects of children copy the adults around them. So if they see every adult around them like this in a device, then they will think that's what reality is all about, and they will want to mimic it. So as soon as they can get their little hands on a device, they'll be there going, oh, what is it that all the parents are so obsessed about with these things? So you are psychologically damaging your child by influencing their behavior at a formative age. And then that argument extends into the way the brain chemistry is altered by the interaction with the device. And if you do that to a prepubescent child, as far as I'm concerned, that is abuse. There's layers of ignorance here that have to be broken down. But when it comes down to it, doing that is abuse, because it's the equivalent of introducing your child to an addictive drug. Would you do that?
There seems to be no escape.
Would you say, hey, little Jane, hey, little Johnny, here's a bit of Coke. I know you're only 3 years old, so we'll only give you a tiny little line of Coke. But here you go, here's some Coke. Mr. Gove on the telly does Coke, so you can have some as well. Would you do that? No, you fucking wouldn't. Yeah?
But it's a conscious effort, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's so like they put everything into the screen, the internet, and everything they've built is all on this bullshit, isn't it? It's all on this technology. And
it can be immensely amazing and beneficial.
Yeah.
But it's not reality. It is not the totality of reality. We need people, in particular the youngest generation, to be able to see it as a tool. That's all it is. It's a
not
tool.
Introduce it.
It doesn't enable your life. It doesn't give you existence. It doesn't validate your existence. It's a tool that you can make use of to help yourself, and then you put it back in the drawer when you're done with it.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, it's just, like I say, the way society's set up and the way these things are introduced into people's lives. That was inevitable, wasn't it? That the children would have access to these things. I mean, anyone's had kids, the first thing they want is the phone. It's the shiny bright light. You're on it. You're using it because that's part of, that's what they've introduced into society. Everybody's using it, so it's going to be a messed up generation going forward. Like you say, let your enemy bring up your kids, and they're bringing it up in this technocratic, this, like I say, altering the brain, altering this, altering the way the kids are, the experiences they're not getting, they should get when they're growing up, they're not getting because everything's done on the screen, or it satisfies them in a different way. So outside things like farms become boring. Seeing animals when you're little, you know, go and see the horses, or you know, go and take kids to a, you know, they don't want to do that. Yeah, or it's dirty, or it's health and safety, and you know, nature's not good, you know, and that's the sort of thing.
Being in a virtual world is clean. It's clean and sanitized. There's no germs. There's no dirt. There's no bugs. It's like, it's because it's not fucking real.
But the rawness of a theatre is unbelievable compared to television. But I was just thinking as well, you know, I think we all did. We all grew up in a house where there was one phone and one television for the family. So there had to be a certain amount of negotiation between people.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, television really has never been a good thing. You know, I'd much rather have been going to the theatre once a week. You know, but we was a working class family. Working class families don't go to the theatre.
No, you go to the pub and you watch the theatre that's in the pub.
Yeah, well, hopefully,
You just watch the drunks fighting with each other. That's theatre.
And kids sit in the garden, bored as fuck.
Well, people would sit in parks and go out and communicate with each other, and that kind of thing.
Sit in the town square, chat with other people that are there, stuff like that. I know that a lot of the argument from the mainstream is the kind of stuff we're mentioning now is just romanticizing the past because we're old.
We're not that old.
I know, but it's a classic argument that's been used now for a long time, that whatever the older people are saying is obviously bunkum because the young people want to do things differently. You know, they're changing the world. It's a new world, man. You're a dinosaur and your ideas are old-fashioned.
No, look well, their president, or your presidents, or your leaders, or your prime minister, they're all ancient. And they, you know what I mean? So we're nowhere near those sorts of ages, you know. So,
but they concentrate on presenting that concept of the youth moving forward.
Yeah,
I was going to mention that in that sense, at the moment, we've got that that millennial demographic coming into adulthood now. Some of them being old enough to fit in the classic adult bracket, you know, 25 to 35 kind of age range. So they are the primary adults that run your society at the moment, because that's the main age group that does all the stuff in society, like running the jobs and owning the homes and buying the shopping and all that kind of stuff. They're the largest demographic, and they're the generation that began off the back of the pharmaceutical agenda, such that we're now beginning to see the rise of the problems of things like mental problems, emotional issues, such that it's become endemic that the system has to reply to that with things like mental health awareness, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. The amount of diagnoses that people are labeled with, yet they're still expected to be a functioning member of adult society. You know, to hold down a job and whatever, but they got ADHD or ODD or DDD, whatever it is. Yeah, they've got some kind of label of a mental issue. I would argue that all of that comes out of the 80s and 90s and the sheer dominance of a certain style of pharmaceutical industry that has generated that environment deliberately, because they want a bunch of dumbed down idiot people that they can constantly feed medication to. Yeah, they're never cured. They're given these lifelong problems and illnesses that then means the pharmaceutical industry has a lifelong customer. Now,
it's great, isn't it? It's a great system they've got going. Very satanic, I have to say.
We're starting to get that rise of the autism adult demographic. Yeah, the autistic adult demographic is starting to build up a majority. It's no longer a tiny, tiny minority in your society. It's become endemic. The reason I'm mentioning that is because I think pretty soon, within like 10 to 20 years, at the age of approximate another generation, generation coming through, the kids that are children now, or young adults now, even up to the age of 18, early 20s, they're going to be that internet age who have been affected by all the stuff like we've just been talking about. They have no life knowledge of existence before the internet. They have difficulty interacting with people directly because everything they do is through a screen. They have multiple mental health issues. They absolutely buy into the propaganda and the structure that's presented to them by the system of authority. That means they will champion the authority. They demand more government. Yeah,
that state control over their mental health and the drugs they're receiving. There's also big carrots for that as well. The big concessions. If you are one of these people with mental health problems, you know, you're almost given an easy ride. Yeah? You're given a little bit of extra help to get a job, maybe, or whatever. You know, it's carrot and stick.
The way they do that, right? It doesn't. I know what you're saying, but it doesn't quite end up working out that way. What they'll actually do is they tell the public and they tell you that, oh yeah, we can help you with these special schemes that will get you into work and all this lot. But what they're actually getting you into is some kind of work scheme or 0-hour contract, which basically means it doesn't really help your life at all. If anything, it probably makes your life worse. You end up in a working poverty situation, but they, the system, get to move your number from the unemployed list or whatever to the functioning member of society list. And this is what I mean about we are approaching a generation of functioning autistic adults that will be the majority of the adults of your society. That even more so, that is a demonstration of Brave New World. They are not quite yet at the stage of directly breeding the members of society the way they do in Brave New World, yeah, in the gestation chambers and all that shit. But instead, what they're doing is just from near enough from the point of conception, the human robot, the biological robot that gestates and carries the child, will be accessed such that that child's physiology, his biology, and its mentality will be affected such that it becomes this autistic adult. What would they be? Not a delta, maybe a delta. You know, there won't be an alpha or a beta in the Brave New World system. There'd be at least a delta or maybe an epsilon.
There's almost nothing. There are almost no alpha examples left anymore. I think that's maybe a part of the problem. The fact that, like, you know, we had this discussion about mental health before, and somebody saying everybody's a little bit mad somewhere. I say, no, I'm not. You know, I know what normal is, and I'm normal. Yeah, you know, it's a big category, and everybody who's normal can be different. But you're normal without any mental problems. That is a possibility, but they've even taken that away. Yeah, seems to me. And that's a part of it. And it's also the infantile. Like I said, they give them carrots. You know, if you get on that register, you know, they're almost telling you, oh, once you're on the register, you know, we look after you because you're like a baby again. And we really will look after you. You don't have to worry about all those dangerous, frightening aspects of adulthood. You know, you can be a child for us. But what I wanted to read out was this, the lyrics, just the first verse of this. Because this is written in a very negative sense. It's by John Cooper Clarke, and I've often thought of this line when I see people on their phones. Yeah, pity the plight of young fellows, too long in bed with no sleep, with their complex romantic attachments, or look on their sorrows and weep. They don't get a moment's reflection. There's always a crowd in their eye. Pity the plight of young fellows, regard all their worries and cry. There's always a crowd in their eye. And these people on the phones, they're actually putting that crowd of people in their eye.
Yes.
So they are never alone. They are never the person who is alone. Yeah? So how can a self develop? If that self has to keep changing because the group you're in keeps changing.
Yeah.
So how can a true self ever develop if there's always a crowd in your eye?
Yeah.
Who's going to be looking after them? I mean, it's a horrible thought to think they're going to be looking after us when we're dead old.
Well, I think another, I suppose I better throw in a caveat here. I'm not trying to suggest that mental problems don't exist, or that all of them are manufactured by the system. And that's not what I'm saying at all. You know, don't fall into that kind of simplistic black and white definition. But I am suggesting, and I am speculating a little bit about what could be happening in the future, the direction we go in. But yeah, we're going to hit a major problem where a massive part of the population, whether it's because of the way they alter the diagnostic manual such that more people get categorized as something, you know, I'm sure they could quite easily label all of us with something, because at some point they'll claim we fit one of the diagnoses. But even allowing for that discrepancy statistically in the numbers that are being recorded, there is a rise in the number of people that have mental difficulties, mental problems, mental issues, some of which can be lifelong. And that number is growing constantly, which means within a generation or so, if it keeps going the way they're escalating it, and if other factors do cause more problems, such as the 5G, things like that, I think they will amplify many people's problems. We are looking at a future where the dominant majority in your society are going to be autistic adults, functioning autistic according to the system, but that will be functioning where a lot of their day-to-day life is provided for by the governmental system. So it creates a symbiotic trap. And this is the whole thing that Huxley was describing in Brave New World. You know, it's similar to Plato's Republic. If you go and read Plato's Republic, he's describing a similar symbiotic trap.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, yeah? Because, I mean, some people actually willingly put themselves into that category. And I'll mention his name, Brian Harvey. Yeah. Now, many times I've seen him, you know, in his videos in there, but he's got no qualms about coming on camera and saying, "Oh, I've got bipolar," almost like he's proud of it, or almost like, you know, he's telling you because he thinks that's going to give him an excuse, get sympathy. I mean, why are people so ready to stand up there and say, "Oh, I've got a mental problem, it's bipolar. I'm bipolar." I mean,
maybe using it as a shield, but also for a lot of people, when you get given a label, an official diagnosis label, it can be somewhat of a relief, because often people with mental issues will go through a period where you don't know what's wrong with yourself. You find it difficult to try and figure out how to help yourself because you don't know what it is that's going wrong with you. Yeah. So when somebody that is a supposed authority, a doctor or a therapist or whatever, turns around and says, you know, listens to you and says, "Oh yeah, you are this, you are bipolar," the receiver of that information will then go, "Oh right, now it makes sense. Okay, show me all the literature, the pamphlets you got about that," and they'll read it and they'll see a connection or a correlation with the way they feel, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, that describes me. Now I know what it is. Now I can try and either deal with it or cope with it or whatever." Yeah. So it might have been a bit of that, but I know what you're talking about. And in terms of the way he's presented his stuff online, I think he was using it more as a shield. He's basically saying to the public who are viewing his stuff, he's like, "Look, if I get a bit out there sometimes, and if I have a bit of a rant and then all of a sudden I'm really depressed, it's because I've got this problem. So please, you know, don't start bombarding me with shit about why I have these emotional ups and downs."
But yeah, what bothers me is when at what point do we reach where somebody that's a loony is totally, you know, you wouldn't even want to listen to them. But somebody's got bipolar, oh, that's okay. We can listen to them and we can totally believe that what they're saying is credible.
Yeah.
Well, what point did that happen? Because I've always had the opinion, you know, that somebody who's been diagnosed a bit mad is going to be a bit mad, and they're not as credible.
That's the point. That's exactly the point, mate.
So he knows he's saying that as well at the same time.
That's why I got so affronted when certain people decided that they were just going to label me as being some kind of mentalist. It's like, you're obviously not listening to the information. It's just another fucking ad hominem. You don't want to hear the information. So instead, because you have the inability to think through the stuff that's being presented to you, you attack the man. ad hominem. You go to the man. You can't deal with the information. You can't refute the arguments or show them to be illogical. No, so you just attack the man. And that's the whole point. Well, maybe not the whole point, but certainly one of the biggest points of why they push this whole mental health awareness bullshit, correlating to the rise of information available online. So now they propagated this idea that there are so many different categorizations of mad, so many different diagnoses. They can find one that can be attached to you where there will be some correlation, so people can look at it and go, oh yeah, he does do that, and he does do, oh yeah, he does, so he must be mentally ill then. And for exactly the reason you're describing. Because if you've been given a label like that, most of the public that come and hear what you're doing, listen to what you're saying, will go, oh yeah, but he's mad. So you can't really believe anything he's saying because he's got such and such label. This is why I think the way they're going about it, and the way some people have basically just repeated the official narrative and methodology, demonstrates the damaging effects of doing that kind of shit. You know, if they generally want to help people who they think have got some kind of mental issue, there's far better ways of going about it than just going, oh, look, he only says that shit because he's mentally ill. That is not helping the entire problem, and it's completely diverting and misdirecting away from the original information and subject matter that that person was trying to talk about. Yeah, forget addressing the subject. Like, let's talk about USS Liberty. Yeah, if I bring that subject up in official channels, I'll get labelled conspiracy theorist. And by that label, that will mean I'm mentally ill, supposedly, according to them. They could probably add other mental illness relevant labels on the back of that, and they'll say, oh yeah, he's only saying this stuff because of those labels. Whereas if anybody bothers to spend the time to research into that event, you'll see that there is genuine information there about a historical event that reveals quite a lot to you about the way government and world politics works. But you're completely distracted from that because you've just been told the person is mentally ill. So you should just discount anything they're talking about. Aaron.
People should just keep speaking the truth. That's all we have to do.
Yeah.
Simple.
If people are genuinely mad, it's going to become apparent in what they're talking about. Yeah. If occasionally they start going whoop whoop every 2 seconds, you know, as they're talking, you're going to think, well, yeah, maybe he's got Tourette's or something. Yeah. That doesn't mean his information is wrong. It just means he has this other thing going on, this other issue going on. But people are being trained. A lot of them have been indoctrinated into this attitude of, if I get the suspicion that you have such and such problem, that means I just discount everything you're saying. It's just like conspiracy theorist as an incantation. That's what they did back in the 60s. The modern version of it is, oh, you've got such and such mental problem.
Yeah. Well, they'll do their best to do whatever, but, you know, to shut us down or to, you know, stifle anybody, you know, who's got anything good to say. But we know we just keep saying it anyway, and people will always keep saying it. So we'll keep going and keep doing it. So
you got YouTube-itis.
Yeah.
I for one will be quite happy to leave all the false flags and drills alone and never mention them again. I think about 3 have taken place in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I just don't care about them. What's the point? Yeah, what is the point? We thought, you know, I remember the day when we all thought we'd break the code and we'd all be able to predict when the next one's going to happen and catch them at it. But that was just part of the game. Yeah. And now you can't talk about these things because they might close you down. What good does it do anyway?
It's a tactic that other groups have used in a different approach. Like, it's been many years since I think I might have mentioned it or described it, but it's like the ADL, who will attempt to entrap people by encouraging them to utilize certain phrases such as, it's all the Jews, you know, and they want you to put emphasis on a singular group or individual. You know, the same methodology can be applied to UK politics. They want you to put all the emphasis on either a single individual or a little designated group, so that then they can use that to come in after the fact and go, oh, he's an anti-Semite, or he's a a radical for this reason because he claims that all the blame is on one person's shoulders or something like that. It's an entrapment methodology.
Cookie, I'm going to have to do one in a minute, so I don't know if you're going to stay on a bit longer or
no, I was going to wind it up, man. I was just scrolling back up the chat.
On that last point, I was thinking, I was mentioning the drills in sort of relation to normal people who watch the mainstream media, and it's, you know, if you're faced with one of these people, instead of trying to tell them it's a drill, or instead of, you know, trying to explain what a false flag is, just tell them why do you watch it? Whatever it is, it's not going to have any impact on your life, whether it's real or not. You know, why make yourself sad looking at these people who might or might not have been damaged?
I don't think it'd be accurate. I don't think it'd be accurate to say it won't have any effect on your life. Really.
Well, no, I'm thinking of a normal person watching television. Oh dear, there's been a plane crash in Manhattan, a helicopter crash. No, just forget it. Turn it off. It's nothing to do with you. If it's not in your town, just leave it alone. Because, you know, we've been in that position where we're trying to convince people that these are false flags, some of them, but you know, it's going nowhere.
Yeah, but
you know, and it'll be better for the people watching to turn off from the fear, in a way.
I am going to wrap it up in a second, but I do disagree with you on that, because unless you look at the details of what went on in that event, you don't know if the contents will have an effect on you. So something the other side of the world can have an effect on you on this side of the world. Believing that there is no connected effect, no, sorry. Otherwise, that's encouraging people to just stay ignorant.
But for us, yes. But then, you know, you're getting into the next over-intellectualizing, and a lot of people can't. A lot of people can't over-intellectualize.
Do you ever use a biro pen?
Yeah.
Where did that biro pen come from?
My inside pocket.
No, I mean in terms of the invention of the biro, how a biro works, blah blah blah. Where did it come from?
They say it came from NASA.
Yeah, NASA. So what you're suggesting is to say to people, like, it's not happening in your locality, so forget about the fact that they've spent billions, because they did spend billions, something like that, on figuring out how to make a pen that the ink would come out automatically. Yeah, you're telling them to forget that because it's not happening in your locality. But there is a knock-on effect. There is a ripple effect that means it will affect your life, because eventually the sales of fountain pens went through the floor because all of a sudden everybody was buying this new technology called the biro. So did it affect your life? Do you work at a fountain pen factory? You just lost your job because NASA invented a biro pen? Do you see what I mean? This argument that you should just ignore it because it doesn't happen on your doorstep is illogical. It's a fallacy. Everything is connected. You have to look at the details of the event and see if there's a contextual connection that could have an effect on you. When you're talking about geopolitics and stuff like that, absolutely. Something the other side of the world that can seem nothing at all to do with you and your values in life can be knocking on your front door.
Oh, I appreciate that, but I'm just thinking of sort of, you know, family members and that, people that might try to convince friends that these false flags and drills are happening. They'd be better off telling those same people to just turn the television off and go into the park.
Yeah, that is a longer discussion, and we'll do it again next week or something. But yeah, you're talking about how to help people see through a lot of the shit without becoming obsessed in the doom porn, in the catastrophism, in the constant churning of the mill of, like, there's this event and there's this event and there's this event and there's it. I know what you mean, but you know, that's a longer conversation. Let me just say a quick hello. I might miss some out, but I'm just going to whiz through because I know a few people join later in the show. Hello to Jeff. I know I said hello earlier, but it's on his Supreme Lord Commander account. Hello, mate. Hope you're well. And New Being, hello. And Gaston, hello. I know I saw another name in there a minute ago. Where was it? Oh, I'm losing track again. Said hello to Stewie. Hello. Misty Ernst, hello. Hope you're well. And Goldfish Brain AL. Hello. Hopefully your memory will last a bit longer than the goldfish. Ingy Irby, hello mate, hope you're all right. And Robert Smith, hello. Not quite Mad Max yet, no. It might get there eventually, but not for a while. A new being, hello. I'm not sure if I said hello to you earlier, but hello again. And Steve Tagoose, hello. Check out his show on a Saturday night on the Steve Tagoose channel, the Steve Tagoose Mystery Show. Paula B, hello. New being Stephen Owens, hello. And James Owen, hello. Were you lurking again? Lotsam Tatsuro, hello. And Eman Pudama, hello. I said I'm trying to scroll quick-ish, but you know what it's like. And I like to try and give a shout out, say hello to everyone. Open-minded skeptic, hello. If I can, every so often. I don't do it every time because sometimes there's a lot of people in there and it takes ages to go down through the list of everyone. But thanks for joining us. Thanks for giving us your attention for a couple of hours or so. And I Pete had to drop out. We'll be back again on Wednesday night on Reality Chat channel. That's Pete's channel. Doing the reality chat, we'll talk about news events and whatever. Maybe we'll go over some of the stuff about the junkie politicians and things like that. Yeah, I'll be back again next week, hopefully. Thanks again for tuning in, folks. Hope you found something useful out of it. Take care, keep talking, keep looking, keep thinking before they make it illegal. They're trying to, but not quite yet. And thanks, Gary, for joining in. I'll see you again soon. Cheers.